Hello and welcome to the Proptech Hot Seat on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we explore trends and technologies driving innovation across the built environment. The show is brought to you in partnership with Proptech Ireland, the hub for innovators, investors, and indeed for industry leaders. In the Proptech Hot Seat today is Guy Windsor Lewis, CEO and founder of Locale. Guy, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Not at all, Carol. It's a pleasure to be here, and my dog Bruce, who's probably going to howl during the interview. But
well, if you are a regular listener, you will know that I regularly record with a dog on my knee.
Oh right, okay, so I'm not alone then.
We are open to all species, so
okay.
they're very welcome. But and you are very welcome today. Most people who have been following the evolution of PropTech will be familiar with Locale as maybe one of the original proponents of PropTech, and I don't want to say evangelists, but I don't think that would be too far off. So maybe just talk to people who aren't familiar about Locale and what it is that you do.
So we are an occupier experience platform, and what that means basically is that we sort of address all the different sectors within real estate. So a lot of our competition and colleagues just look at commercial office or resi or whatever, but we look at everything. So we've got retail, we've got resi, we've got commercial office space. We are unusual in the fact that we just focus in the UK. We have one place in Dublin, but that's off the mainland. That's the only place that we're outside, purely because I've always felt there is huge scope, and the market is massive. So why go anywhere else? We really don't need to. It's pretty untapped market out there, Carol.
Yeah, no, and do you know it's actually quite refreshing to hear you say that. And I would actually hold the same view in Ireland, albeit at a much smaller market. But I think in terms of occupier experience and user experience, I mean, unfortunately, that language is still, I mean, yes, over the last 2 to 3 to 4 years, it's becoming more commonplace, but in some way, there was certainly an element of not understanding exactly what that is. So when did you found Locale?
So we started in 2005, so which does seem quite a long time ago. As you can probably tell by the grey beard and things, but it's taken.
Well, no, the question is, Guy, were you that grey before the startup?
No, because God no.
Listen, I feel your pain. I really do. Startups can age you.
You can probably see the scars on the front of my forehead from me constantly banging my head against the real estate brick wall of trying to make indents into our lovely colleagues and friends in real estate.
Well, I think that if you were using the language of user experience or occupier experience almost 2 decades ago, that would have been a very different type of conversation.
Absolutely floated over most people's heads. And we started as a B2B because honestly, the people just did not want to engage with the end users. So occupiers, tenants, consumers, residents, call them what you will, but they really didn't want to engage with those. So we started as a very simple sort of platform, basically, just trying to more as a communication, and it sort of evolved into this sort of very complicated sort of agile property management system. But initially, it was all about communicating and making information more transparent. Sort of on a on a permission-led basis. So sort of starting with big business parks. In fact, we do East Point Business Park, which is quite a big boy. So we still do that, and big mixed-use estates. And now it's evolved into this thing where we do visitor management, we do key holding, deliveries, help desks, facility bookings, etc., etc., etc. But it's morphed, Carol, as you rightly pointed out. We started very much as B2B, and then probably about 7, 8 years ago, people sort of saying, "Oh, can we now engage with the people that are actually coming into the building? So the residents, the tenants, the occupiers." So we kind of sort of morphed into this B2C sort of beast. So we still very much have that. We have a portal, a platform, which the portal is very much for sort of desktop led. So that's for your on-site building management teams who are coming across big spreadsheets. So they need to occupy, they need to be able to manage, key management and see which keys are out across a site that's got maybe 200 or 300 apartments or sort of multiple sort of commercial tenants in a building, deliveries, that sort of stuff, plus all the visitors. And you can't do it on your phone where you've got people. We've been doing the Shard for the last 12 years. In fact, they've just re-signed from the 5, which is great. But you can't manage that many people coming in and out of a building on an app. Just on your phone. You need to have a desktop. So we did that, and then we sort of built the app around the sort of the B2C side. But then we have an events business as well, which does the well-being and the polls and the surveys, and that's going very well. Plus, also we now have a digital. We sort of stream digital content, so which is a bit of a breakaway. But it started. We do a lot of resi. We do about 40,000 resi sort of units, homes, and it struck me early doors that there was quite a cross section of demographic, and it's all very well for should we say the younger ones to access information on their desktop, and they were familiar with technology, but should we say the sort of the silver surfers weren't quite as keen. So it was basically trying to put that information in front of them, so when they walk into their foyer, they can actually see the relevant information there and then. So it was always a dream to sort of have this sort of digital sort of content sort of being relayed onto screens and things. So we launched that about 2.5 years ago, and it's gone down really well.
Oh, fantastic. So, there's so much in what you've said there that I want to get into a little bit of greater detail. And by the way, I'm not at all surprised to hear that your foray into the Irish market was through East Point, because obviously there's Proptech pioneers there led by Gavin Gallagher. And Gavin actually has a show on the iPropertyRadio channel. So he's always showcasing innovation and ready to lead when it comes to taking a chance on technologies and ideas, and he will generally be many years ahead of the ground. So actually, I think East Point has been perhaps the testing ground for a lot of startups, and not that you were at that time, but for a lot of startups, and it's something for which we are so grateful, because we need business park operators and resi operators who are willing to embrace technology. In a way, I'm so interested to hear the transition that you've taken, because actually I would have put you in the bracket of B2B. So I didn't realize that you were doing that direct to consumers. So when you talk about kind of the B2C offering, is that being paid for by the community, or is it still being paid for by the industry, as in by the portfolio owners and managers?
Very rarely. So on legacy stuff, it all comes out of the service charge. So that would be the tenants paying for that, or the residents coming out of the sort of domestic service charge. For new builds or refurbs, then yes, that does come out of the capex, or the capital expenditure fund. So that does come out, and then they will then cover that, in our experience, sort of for 2 or 3 years. So to actually soften the blow, so get it up and running and cover the first 2 or 3 years of sort of annual fees, license fees as we call them, and then after that they will then hand that over to the cost over to the service charge. But
then in terms of I'm really interested in that transition, because when you talk about establishing communities, it goes so far beyond the amenities or even the events and things like that. And I'm always trying to understand not just where the value is, but the value as it is perceived. So for the communities, do you have data on, say, the take-up of communities when that transition is happening? How many or what proportion of your communities would opt to continue with it?
I mean, we track that quite carefully. In the commercial world, it's not quite as easy to track, because you don't know how many people are actually in that building. We can tell how many tenant companies are, because we've got to register the tenant companies, obviously, but you don't know how many people are there. And especially post-COVID, I mean, it's a suck your thumb and put your finger in the air. You have really, not very many. It's becoming less clear, or it was very unclear, and it's becoming clearer now. But it's still pretty foggy in terms of trying to work out how many people are actually accessing the building at any one time. You can do it through your occupier, through your gates transition, and your visitor management stuff. But even then, it's quite difficult to work out how many people are actually accessing a building if they're not sort of smart on that sense. The resi guys, it's slightly more easier. So we have so if they're for every one apartment, there's probably 2.5, 3 people living in that apartment. So we have about 160, 170% engagement or registration, which means that we've got 1.5 people per apartment across our portfolio who are registered and using it. And you can, but it's more of a subjective thing for them. So it's about, it's personal. It's where I live. I want access to this information, and also things like deliveries, things like key holding. That stuff is used on a day-to-day basis on multiple times. So yeah, it's quite easy to track the sort of the use of that. So in terms of engaging with those guys, it's a lot easier. With the commercial guys, again, there are sort of gatekeepers, as I would call them, which is your on-site teams, and it depends how engaged they are as to how engaged the commercial community is. And you can do lots and lots of things around that, but essentially it's the on-site teams that are going to gauge whether there is a high level of engagement or a low level engagement.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Guy, tell me, from setting out to found this, were you coming from a technology background? Were you coming from a real estate? What prompted you to kind of recognize the poor occupier experience at that time?
I had a business in the late 90s, which I closed down at the end of the 90s and went and did something else. But one of the last things we did, it was a web business. One of the last things we did was engage with a company called MEPC, who, I don't know if you remember them, but at the time they were a very, very big business park operator in the UK. So they had about 26, 27 different business parks, and we engaged with the one in Staines. And they had, they wanted to look into this. They had some issues with regards to sort of just basic communication with their tenants. And they had IBM there, who were quite a big force. They had Cisco coming in, Informix, different sort of tech companies. And they just wanted to have a platform where they could just tell people what was going on. And they wanted to throw events there. They had a big sort of dome in the middle, like a cafe, and they wanted to tell people what was going on. And they really struggled with that. But they wanted to reach not just the tenant officers, as they say, but also the wider range of people as well. So yeah, so we put in some things like we were engaging with Waitrose at Work, which was the precursor to Ocado. And you had to pay a fee. I mean, can you imagine? So we paid about $3,500 a year for a license, which we paid to Waitrose so they could come and deliver and people could order food and come and pick it up. And it was bonkers. But so we did quite a few cool things there. And then I went and got something else because there was no traction. It was really hard. And then 2005, it slowly started a business again, and it started to build. And we engaged with DTZ and AMEC and a few people like this. And then we went through the 2008-9 crash, and it was just like, now you've got to diversify. So more clients go into Resi. And then and then we had a really good time from sort of 2011-12 until about March 2020, really. So
that's interesting in itself, because having come through, and look, similarly, I've been self-employed in the property industry for a similar period, and having come through the crash, you kind of think you've seen it all, and then COVID hit, and
yes,
and now we've had some other really unprecedented global and Irish events. How was COVID for you? Because I would imagine that if you were able to embrace the digital offering, there was probably something that could be done that's interesting and different.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really challenging time. I mean, I think from a business point of view, there were some challenges because quite a few people decided to chuck it in, so they didn't want to continue. The Resi did okay, but not great. But we were prevented from actually sort of meeting people and things, so that was more tricky to actually just get out there and talk to people. But I think the thing that will follow me to my grave on the COVID thing was the raising of well-being, and I think emotional well-being certainly within our company. And for a guy of my age and background and privileges to actually witness firsthand the stuff that was going on was extraordinary. And we are still, obviously we're sort of very on it. We've always had a really good culture in the business, and we've always looked after people. I guess, I come from a background where I've been made redundant, so I sort of went back into this sort of world. And 3 or 4 early people, 2 of which are still with us, 10, 12, 13 years later, they're still there, hadn't had great work experiences. So we really all sort of set out to say, well, actually, we can, I don't want to be a family because we're not a family, but in terms of a work base and a work family and a work culture, absolutely, we do try and look after the people that work here. And it was absolutely gutting. It was heart-wrenching and we had, when you get up in the morning and you go to work and there are people coming in and they're just bursting to tears in front of you and on sitting and saying, I just can't do this anymore. And the level of anxiety and the level of distress that COVID in all its wonderment caused was just awful. So yeah, I think that's the one thing that will stay with me, and that I think we probably all learned from. I really hope everyone has learned from this, because you look around now and there's I see the figures. There's 500,000 people who are still out of work due to mental health issues, and there's another 500,000 people who just chucked it in because they just didn't want to. And those are guys and girls in their late 40s, early 50s who at the very first opportunity to retire took it. And I'm sure you've seen this and you've spoken about this. So there's a million people out there who could be on around and just not. And then that then caused the great reshuffle, and then the whole and then inflation. So it's been it has not been easy for SMEs like myself to sort of navigate our way through the last 3 or 4 years at all. So no, it's been hard. It's been hard work.
I fully appreciate that. And I think one of the things that when we're talking about the construction industry or the property industry or right across the built environment, we always use language like, oh, it's such a resilient industry. And actually what I saw during COVID is people were worn down trying to be resilient. So I've stopped using that terminology now, because actually I think it's almost an excuse for people who are put in really difficult positions that aren't improved by government policies and other policies. So actually, I'm going to stop calling our industry resilient as a badge of honor. We shouldn't need to be as resilient as we have had to be. And that's not just since COVID. That's kind of spanning over decades. But what I'm really curious about, for somebody who recognized the need to improve the user's experience in property back in 2005, and I would say fast forward 10 years from there, we had not made much progress at all. I think, no, genuinely, like,
I totally
and
agree.
I'd be interested to hear your take on it, but to me, it feels like there was not just slow progress, but resistance almost within the industry. And it feels like only in the last number of years that actually, and when I say number of years, I mean literally probably kind of maybe 60 or maybe since maybe 2019. So I think we were starting to see it before COVID, and then it held back. And we were starting to see the signs.
I mean, we were making good progress in the sort of the mid-teens, I guess. So the sort of 15, 16, 17 was our real, we had good growth, and we went from sort of 5 people to 25, 30 people in that time. So and that's all organic, Carol. That's no VC money. That's no private equity backing. That's just in reinvesting on a continual cycle, which was exciting and bringing all the technology and the marketing and finance in-house. So we are a complete one-stop shop, but also looking at different sectors. So as more and more competition came in, offering more and more whirly bits and smart systems and all that sort of stuff, you then look at it on a more sort of acute basis, and you go, well, hang on a second, there is 5% at the top of the market, which is they got more money than God. These are the really big shiny buildings, lots of glass, huge service charge accounts, and they can do anything they want. And are they going to go for us? Well, yes, they are, but also the pool is now much, much bigger. So you're always trying to go for your own pool. So we made a decision early doors, maybe 3-4 years ago, to actually try and just go for the tier 2, tier 3 buildings. So actually not be hugely expensive, try and be affordable. And then that manifested itself in our tech equity report, which we brought out last year, which I don't know if you've seen or not, but I sort of said, okay, to my new Marcoms guy, I said, let's go and corral some people from the industry and get them all to write about this. So we asked them competition, and they said, oh no, it can't be seen to be led by you. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine, but we're all, at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. So we got some really good influential people, some really good influencers and writers, and Melanie Leach from the VPF, and Michael Beckerman from Cretech, and people who know the industry. And we got them all to write about this one thing. And the whole axis of the paper was to say it doesn't have to be expensive, and it can be affordable. And actually, we should be looking to just roll out that whole digitalization across everything, because that's where the opportunity is, and that's where the benefit comes in. And I still, you're saying sort of, have we progressed? And I go, well, yeah, in many ways, sort of the top end has almost sort of, we're talking about AI, and I go to these conferences, I'm thinking there's absolutely no point in talking about AI, because 90% of the buildings in the UK have nothing. I'm sure they know what AI is, and I'm not being, whatever it is, but it just I find it mind-boggling that we are talking about AI in industry when 90% of the buildings have zero or very little digitalization. That's my frustration.
That's a very pessimistic summation, because actually I would hold the view that there are companies using and relying upon AI that don't even understand they are, because their tech providers are doing it. And I think, I wouldn't have thought that the proportion that is not reaching to even a semi-smart state would be that high now in the era of ESG reporting, because it's just difficult to finance unless you're able to track data, and you just can't do that without good tools and technology in place. So I think maybe I'm naive, but I would have been much more optimistic even about the state of the older buildings. And in fact, I'm really excited about the technology that could be deployed across older buildings to enhance not just the data reporting, but actually the user experience. When we talk about wayfinding through university campus of all of these 200, 300 and 400-year-old buildings up to, I think that's really exciting. So
it is.
There's a different type of tech gets rolled out in the shiny buildings, and it's new and it's exciting, and that's great, but there's massive potential in our existing stock.
Huge. Yeah. And even just get on the ladder, get on the first step.
Yeah.
Even just like transparency. So you can have an app, and you can have announcements, and you can just find out what's going on, let alone accessing documentation, or, booking a room, or God forbid, there's that sort of stuff. I mean, but yes, I mean, wayfinding, absolutely perfect.
I think actually you highlighted something that we have touched on previously, and I think it's maybe a little bit of a warning bell to the industry, but I've seen it across urban planning, I've seen it across the architectural design, and across construction and real estate transactions, and into the management and facility side of it. But the reality is the gap between those who are embracing technology and those who aren't, that gap is widening to the extent that I would be very concerned about those left behind. And I don't think it's in anybody's best interest. I know, there's an attitude out there that sometimes, the cream rises to the top, but actually we need a full ecosystem. So we actually want our competitors to be better as well.
Yep.
We do want to bring more of the industry. Yes, there'll be fall off, and that's appropriate, but I do think that we need to bring more of the industry with us. And part of it, I wonder, when we started evangelizing around PropTech, did we alienate people? And I hold myself to account for that too. But the reality is, often we talk about data without explaining what it is. We talk about user experience without explaining what it is. So for somebody who's been a pioneer in this space, going back 2 decades, like what does user experience and the occupier experience mean to you? What does it look like in 2023?
Oh, I think you've got to keep it simple. And I absolutely agree with what you're saying. We set out to really, demystify this. So to put it into layman's terms. So people say a building manager. So I roll back 18 years, and the vast majority of the building managers were ex-servicemen. So a lot of Army, RAF, whatever it is, Navy guys. they were walking around with a hatchet or whatever it was, going to bang the boilers and that sort of stuff, and they really were not very interested in sort of front of house and service and that whole sort of the sizzle when you walk into a building and you get the greeting and everything else. That was starting to change. So I remember I actually bumped into the first Knight Frank building manager, a lady at Waterhouse Square, which is the big red block Prudential building in Midtown, I think it is. And we have a laugh about it because it was so basic. But my thing was very much, because I'm not from a technical background, was you've got to make it simple. So you cannot present people with something that's going to go, and people have a sort of a tech phobic reaction and they go, no, can't do it. And actually, yes, you can. You just got to, it's about pictures. It's about almost putting it, I hate to say this, but it's almost like making it childlike in its appeal, to sort of, storify it and that sort of stuff. Is to just make it really simple. So you press it, it works. It does what it says on the tin, and demystify it, make it less complicated. What I think sadly is happening now is that there are a lot of companies out there with a lot of money and a lot of backing, and they feel they've got to fill this cup of joy of technology full to the brim. So they've got hundreds of different elements within it. And I think people look at it and go, and they end up using a tiny amount. Even for our clients, we're always trying to sort of encourage people to use stuff, but they end up using the 5 or 6 things that they are comfortable with, that they use on a day-to-day basis, and the rest they are occasional users. But
does that not mirror the experience? That really though mirrors the experience of most people and how they use anything, our computers, our laptops, our phones, our cars. We only use it to do what we know we need it to do, as opposed to it fulfilling its potential.
And this is exactly why I'm saying it doesn't need to be expensive. So the whole thing about our mantra is it doesn't need to. And I think because people read about it in the provinces and they see London and the big cities and the big buildings and talking about all this very exciting smart stuff, they think, it's not for me. And actually, no, it absolutely is for you. So make a call. I don't care who it is. I mean, ideally us, but I mean, it really doesn't matter. Just get on board with it, because it will change your life. And for 1 or 2 minutes of education, it really is something that, as you said, otherwise you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
And that's the
you're
fear.
saying,
that's the fear.
You're saying it'll change their life. We wanted to enhance the lives of their customers. Yeah. Which is, and in some cases can be even a bigger driver. Guy, tell me, do you define your company as a tech company or a tech-driven events and experience company?
Yeah, I have this argument all the time with my CPO. So he would say we're definitely a tech business. He would say we're a SaaS business. I would say we're service. So we're a tech service business, because at the end of the day, you're providing a piece of technology, but it's only as good as the people who are using it. And if those people aren't using it, then there's no point in having it. So we have a handful of salespeople, but we already have 3 times the number of support people.
Okay.
So that's just not that's from onboarding all the way down the line, from cradle to grave. And we now have this sort of this framework, this journey where we have people allocated in. So account managers and who aren't on the selling side, they're just there to support. And that's called customer success or customer support, or call it what you want in terms of the title. But it's just about making sure, ringing around on an ongoing basis, going to see people, educating them, providing them with support, and just making sure they're using it. Because there is turn and churn. It's not just us that's changing jobs and things. It's all the whole of that ecosystem is changing jobs. So I can be talking to you 1 minute and you can be the biggest fan, and then I phone back 2 weeks later and you've gone, and somebody has come in and goes, oh no. So you've got to make sure you've got to stay on it the whole time.
Yeah, isn't it funny? We talk about technology, but I mean that's the same sales experience from decades ago. It's one of the biggest threats to salespeople there. I'm conscious of time, and I don't want to stay too much longer, but across the UK and Ireland, there are so many conflicting and contradictory reports about have we fully returned post-COVID to the workplace, and yet we're seeing the demand for offices slacken. We're seeing offices change of use. It's a really interesting and not always in a positive sense about the use of offices, you know, the future, the short term and the long term future of offices. What are you seeing on the ground with your clients in the office space?
It's really interesting. So so again, we tend to deal with the bigger offices, and smaller offices are in sort of, you know, busy places. So we're not seeing a massive drop off. I mean, in terms of sort of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday brigade, that seems to have settled into a sort of a sort of normalcy, I would say. The work from home is definitely there. I think there is going to be a dropout of sort of the tier 3. So those buildings that are a little bit further away from sort of the main sort of, you know, transport hubs, those buildings that may be a little bit tired, are not quite as attractive, don't have as many, you know, attractive facilities and that sort of stuff, haven't really got a co-working element to them. And I think also we've got a really mad situation with rental properties here. I don't know if you've got it over there or not, but we have a crazy situation where it is really expensive to rent properties. And then they've just put back the whole energy and qualification thing. So the certification thing. So that's gone away. But there are definitely companies, and we're in touch with companies that are all about that refurb. So seeing, you know, the smaller commercial buildings that are not failing but struggling, I think there will be a change of use over the next 5 years, and I think they will become more multi-use. So they'll have a bit of co-working, they'll have a bit of resi, and they'll have a bit of retail, and then there'll be a little bit of public area within that as well. So what I would like to see, and what I also think will happen, is you'll have little oases of sort of mixed use communities coming back into those sort of, you know, grey, slightly darker areas in our cities that basically sort of Friday, Saturday, Sunday aren't really frequented very much. And I think people will begin to fill those gaps. That's what I hope to see. That's the romantic. That's the romantic in me, Carol. But
no, I hope you're right, because actually what you're describing there is the placemaking ideal. And actually for new schemes coming out now, that's what they strive for. It's just something we haven't done well in past decades.
No.
So actually, if we can do this in a way that's sustainable for the industry and enjoyable for the community, then actually I think that's the ideal. So yes, I hope you're right in that prediction. Obviously time will tell. And I suppose before we finish up today, because I know you've been really considered quite a thought leader in the PropTech space, and I know you've been bold about your predictions and expectations, and I think maybe calling out the industry when needs be, which I believe is very important. For 2024 on the technology side, you know, what are the trends that you're expecting to see?
Definitely more consolidation. So there are now about half a dozen very, very big boys, and girls, players out there who've got huge amounts of private equity backing, and that's not all marketing and setting up stalls in Singapore or the West Coast, or whatever it is. There's a lot of that for acquisition funds. So I think there will be some consolidation, further consolidation. But also I don't see, don't get me started on politics, Carol, because we'd be here all blimmin' night, I tell you. But again, that's another variable that just makes navigating a business just a complete nightmare the last couple of years. I don't get me started, because I will go off on one. But suffice to say, I think we've got an election coming up, and probably in October. And I think I think people are still going to be sitting on their hands. I think it's another year of quiet, of caution. And I think maybe 2025, when people understand the Labour government, isn't going to kill us all, and actually it might be quite freeing, is that I think 2025 is probably 2026 will probably be better years. But I think 2024 is going to be another, not slow, but I think it'll be calm. It's not going to be the race away year, the post-COVID race away year, because I think this has been better. I think next year will probably be around about the same. But I think people are still nervous, and the economy is not settled at all. And no one in their right mind, no business people are going, oh yeah, it's all fine. It's not. It's far from fine.
I can tell you, Guy, the situation is not too dissimilar here, and we have similar political challenges that we know are going to be more subject to change in 2024 than we've seen in the last decade and a half, and that's certainly making people nervous. But again, you know, I always remember we go back to basics. You know, you control what you can control, and there are certain controllables for a business, and unfortunately, the political climate isn't one of them. So, you know, that's outside of our control. But I suppose from my perspective, I'm always interested in what the industry is going to do, how the industry is going to react. I think that what we're seeing right now, PropTech adoption was much too slow, in my opinion, and I think COVID was a huge enabler. But unfortunately, adoption will only happen where there's a margin to do it. And I feel that margins are going to be very strained next year. But look, time will tell. But certainly from a placemaking perspective, I hope your trends are accurate. And certainly I'd love to chat to you maybe in mid-2024 and see how that's going.
Good. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That was
No
Guy
problem.
Windsor Lewis. My pleasure. Thanks, Guy. That was
Nice.
Guy Windsor Lewis, CEO and founder of Locale. Thanks to our producer, Carol Tallon, and to the audio team at Hear Me Roar Media. Before we go, just a special word of thanks to our sponsor, Proptech Ireland, for making these conversations possible. And finally, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Proptech Hot Seat here on iPropertyRadio.com.